Hastur, the monarch in gold, the emperor in amber, the ruler in topaz, or, as he is most commonly known,
黄衣国王
So, how powerful is the Boston Dandelion? That one doesn't even work. I'm gonna stop doing it. So, how powerful is the King in Yellow? And more importantly, if Goku punched him in the face, would he die?
It would be extremely painful.
Now, before we can talk about powers, we have to decide which sources we are going to use. Because you see, the King in Yellow, the character, who by the way we are going to call Hastur for the rest of this video, Hastur was created in 1895 by a writer called Robert William Chambers. But from now on, we are going to shorten his name to just Chambers. Chambers created Hastur over 100 years ago, and although Chambers was the one who created the character, Chambers was not the only one who used Hastur in his stories. And nowadays, Hastur is in the public domain. Literally anyone can use this character. Over the decades, there has been a lot of people who have tried to expand on the lore written by Chambers, and there has also been people who simply decided to add Hastur to their fictional universe. And for storytelling purposes, this is all fine. But if we are trying to power scale the character, the sources that we use matter, and they matter a lot. We are then presented with two options. Either we use as a valid source anything written by anyone ever, or we only use what Chambers wrote. If we accept everything as a valid source, then Hastur becomes the strongest character in fiction, because right now I can open Microsoft Word and type something like this, and this would have as much weight as anything written by Chambers. But I hope you agree with me when I say that doing this is complete nonsense. And so, the only thing that makes sense is to exclusively use the stories that Chambers wrote, which is bad news for Hastur, because out of all the stories Chambers wrote, Hastur only features in 4 of them. I'm just gonna pull the trigger right now. If we only use the stories that Chambers wrote, Hastur, the King in Yellow, he's really weak. And if we try to use other writers, then the question becomes, aside from the creator of the character, which writers should we consider as a valid source and why? And I promise you that if we try to settle that question, we would be here all day. So we are going to simplify things. The only sources we are going to use for this video are the stories written by the person who created the character. And look, yes, I know that for the vast majority of people watching this entire explanation was almost unnecessary. I could have just opened the video by saying, hey guys, I'm only gonna use Chambers, and then start talking about powers. But if I did that, people would yell at me for only using Chambers. I mean, people are gonna yell at me regardless, but at least now you understand my reasoning for why I'm only using Chambers. And with this preamble out of the way, now we can talk about powers. So, as mentioned already, Hastur only features in 4 stories, and Chambers does not give us much information about him. But here's what I will propose Hastur is capable of. Within the 4 stories Chambers wrote, there are sporadic mentions of a text called the King in Yellow, and when some of the characters in the stories read this text, they sometimes experience negative mental effects. I am going to push this really far and say that Hastur can make you crazy if he wanted to. Yes, I know that that's a huge leap in logic, but I am trying to be charitable to Hastur. Alright, now what else can we claim that Hastur is capable of? Well, there is this story where a guy learns how to turn living things into statues. So, for no reason, let's say that Hastur can do that as well. Like I said, I am trying to be charitable. Moving on, Hastur seems to know some necromancy. To some extent, he can reanimate corpses. Look, I know that so far the King in Yellow sounds pretty underwhelming, but there are 2 more abilities we can give to Hastur, and the good news is, those 2 abilities are actually somewhat decent. Hastur once touched a lock, and the lock rapidly aged and turned to dust. We could argue Hastur has some sort of touch-based disintegration ability. And finally, Hastur seems to have teleportation powers. If we take the little evidence we have and push it to the absolute limit, we could argue that Hastur could teleport anyone to wherever he wants. So, under this reasoning, he could, for example, teleport you inside of the sun. And that's it. Those are all the powers we could give to Hastur, if we only use what Chambers wrote. If we were to accept stories written by other people, then at that point you might as well start writing your own sick fanfic and make the King in Yellow as strong as you want. But if we only use what Chambers wrote, then these are the powers of Hastur. And with that said, time to answer the question of this video. So, how powerful is the King in Yellow? Well, if we grant to Hastur the ability to teleport his opponents wherever he wants, then there are some popular characters that Hastur could defeat. There are quite a few mainstream and well-known characters that, despite their power, if they were to be teleported into a black hole, they would die. Sadly, such tactic would simply not work with him. Yes, my friends, I am delighted to announce that the King in Yellow could not possibly ever hope to defeat our hero, the champion of fiction, the tallest, mightiest, and most unbeaten, Jiren the Grey. But also the Carrot. Even if we give to Hastur teleportation powers, that still would not be enough to beat Goku. And that's it for Hastur pretty much. We could end the video right here, but there are other things about this character that I would like to discuss. For starters, as I already mentioned, there are only 4 stories in which Chambers features the King in Yellow, and those 4 stories are actually not that long, so you could become an expert on the King in Yellow today. I'm going to leave the 4 stories in the description, check them out. Now, let's talk about the personality of this character. From the little Chambers gives us, it seems Hastur has a tremendous desire to rule over others. Hastur is also vengeful, and I would say definitely evil. He is not a good guy at all. Now let's talk about what he looks like. Nowadays, it seems like the most common incarnation of the King in Yellow is something like this. However, Chambers himself actually made a drawing of the King in Yellow. The first thing you will notice are the wings. Most artwork about the King in Yellow that you can find online kinda forgets that the King in Yellow is supposed to have wings. Another detail that pretty much every modern artwork of the King in Yellow tends to forget is that Hastur has 3 little small bells on the top of his head. Alright, I have 2 more things to say and then we are done. When it comes to the backstory of Hastur, nowadays most people will tell you that Hastur is an unknowable mystery, so nobody can ever ask questions about him ever. I find this to be a very lazy way of writing a character, and also not entirely accurate to how Chambers portrayed Hastur, because Chambers gives us a little bit of detail about the possible backstory of Hastur. And lastly, even though I've been calling this character Hastur throughout the entire video, his name is not actually Hastur. I didn't want to keep saying the King in Yellow over and over again, so that's why I decided to call him Hastur. I did it for convenience, but that's not his name. Under the context of the 4 stories written by Chambers that feature the King in Yellow, the word Hastur is always used to refer to a star. Later, other writers use the word Hastur as a name for the King in Yellow, but under the 4 stories written by Chambers, Hastur is the name of a star. And that's it, that's everything I have about the King in Yellow. He is a very influential character that has stood the test of time. I would not be surprised if in 100 years from now, people still remember the King in Yellow. This character has inspired many writers over the decades, and for sure, he will inspire many more. A very influential character, but not strong at all. Goku solos, unironically. And that's it, we finally talked about the King in Yellow. Maybe one day in the future we could power scale Manayut Sushai, but that is something future me would have to deal with. For now, you and I are done. My friend, what can I say that has not been said before? Thank you for watching. Really, thank you. I would like to announce that my immediate future plans for this channel is to make videos power scaling characters from Lord of the Rings. I have never watched the movies or read the books. I don't know how long it's going to take me to go through all the text, but that is the next quote-unquote big project for my channel. I don't know if that sounds interesting to you, but I hope you join me for that. However, until I am ready to tackle Lord of the Rings, expect other filler videos on this channel. For now though, we must part ways, and if I'm lucky, I will see you next time. Take care, and sincerely, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!